Hello and welcome once again to the Monster Sci-Fi Show. I am your host, The Monster, back once again to give you some sci-fi news for this week. So, today being 9/11, unfortunately, which when you're listening to this, it's 9/12, but I'm recording this podcast today on 9/11. And I remember when this happened, my daughter, who was maybe at least 6 months old, was sitting on my lap. We were watching the Today Show, and then the news came through that there was a plane accident or a plane crash at the Trade Center. And I remember, all of this coming down. I'm like, oh my God, this is like the accident that happened with the Empire State Building. And then a short time after that, there was another plane attack. And, my daughter was just happy as can be with all this going on, and I don't want to always be reminded of the tragedy that happened on 9/11. I want to look at this day as being something different, in which it means something more to me, so that I can reflect on this day in a good way. And I'm not being dismissive. I just want to look at this kind of like, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. My cousin had died on my birthday. So now every time I'm going to have a birthday, I'm going to always be reminded of her passing. So in that sense, I don't want to think about 9/11 in those sad terms. I want to look at it, and this is actually thanks to Facebook. Facebook has this weird, hey, remember a couple of years ago you put this online? Well, in my timeline, 2 years ago from today, my wife, my co-host Mr. Gene, and I, we went down on September 10th to the county commissioners meeting to talk on behalf of saving the library's budget, because we were looking at possibly even more layoffs, and we had a shortfall, like almost $30 million. So, we had our time, we spoke, other people spoke after that, but honestly, when we left, we never really felt like anything was going to be accomplished, or it was like bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, fully loaded, 3 balls, 2 strikes, and this is like the last pitch. So either we were going to come out as winners, or we're just going to strike out or grind out, or however this play was going to be. But it was not looking good in our favor. But lo and behold, the next day, a miracle happened, because basically we did have money in reserves, and the commissioners voted to save the library using those reserves to patch up the hole for that year and basically kick the can that problem until next year, which, luckily we're okay. We're not as what we were several years ago. I don't think we'll ever get to that point. But from that point on, we've had this kind of resurgence of still recovering every day and getting back to what we love about the library. So that's what I want to remember. And I remember feeling really proud of what I was able to accomplish with my friends and my wife. And I was speaking in front of the commissioners, and I remember when I was done, I turned around, and since you're not allowed to clap, everyone was just waving their hands, and I was just in awe of everyone doing that. And I was just, to begin with, I was just kind of emotionally drained, and then I just collapsed into my wife's arms, and she hugged me, and that picture was taken by someone from the Herald, Miami Herald, and it got into the paper. So it was nice to see that picture again a couple of years later, still reminding me of what we had accomplished. And it was a good feeling to have. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes, but again, this is what I want to remember 9/11 for: good things, not necessarily bad things. So, all right, so I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, so let's talk about, or again, let me talk about the 3 things that I want to bring up to the surface. First off, we got a Jessica Jones. Jeez Louise, I'm already starting. And that's my problem. Jessica Jones, I haven't read before in the comics, But it is coming on Netflix on November 20th. Now, for me, I have no idea, and I keep mixing up the two with Spider-Woman with Jessica Drew as with Jessica Jones. So basically, all I remember, let me back up. All I know about this is that Kristen Ritter, who was in Breaking Bad and a show that was on ABC for a little while, The Be in 23 or something like that, was going to be the main lead for this character for Jessica Jones. That's all I know. Now, since Daredevil already premiered and was phenomenal, I'm kind of jazzed up for what's next. But again, I don't know what's great about Jessica Jones in the first place. So, doing a little research, I was able to do some information about her, in which in the comics she had been with Peter Parker at the time of when he was bitten with the radioactive spider. And as the story progressed, she got into an accident, which happened to be some kind of radioactivity stuff that spilled on her. Her family was killed. She was in a coma. But the effects of that incident gave her, I guess, some kind of superpowers. Now, I think the problem lies is that in that story, in that character, is that she never really manifested to become a great superhero. So basically, I think she just quit the business of what it is, like everyone else was trying to be like grand in their deeds, and she turned to become a private eye, basically. And she opened up the Alias detective agency or something to that effect, but it's not Alias like the TV show. That's all that I know. The other thing that was interesting, again, not knowing much of the history, but there's a character called the Purple Man. Now, David Tennant, who is our fellow Doctor Who, is going to be playing Zebediah Kilgrave. Now, the information that I was able to come across is that somehow he has some type of mental control in which he used that against Jessica. But to what degree, I don't know. I might get into the comics before the actual series comes out, but I think in my head, you just might as well just wait to see what happens and let that unfold, and then if I like the character enough, then I'll go back into the comics and find it from that point on. But there is a small trailer, nothing great. It's just a couple of images, nothing more. But again, November 20th is going to be the release date for Jessica Jones on Netflix. So now, this is going to be kind of a two-parter together, so I'm going to be going back and forth on these 2 points. I came across a great podcast that I was just so thrilled to have found. And these guys really captured my interest immediately with this one episode. It's number 26, in which they were talking to an author. His name is Matthew Denian, and they were talking about his latest book, or his book called Chimera, the Scourge of the Gods. And this is a kaiju novel. Now, the podcast that I was listening to is Masterland, Ohio, and Andy and Mark are a father and son team. Actually, it should be the other way around. Andy is the son, and then Mark is the father, and basically did the podcast. And they started off with this podcast in which, before they're going into the actual interview, they were talking about some news about the Hobbit movies being re-released. No quiet place in the library. Okay, so, and Andy made this great comment about why the movies never really worked. He said, Jeepers. Okay. So, and Andy had made this comment, which was perfect, dead on, as to why the Hobbit movies didn't work. And he said that this is really a kid's book, and the movie lacked a whimsy nature. to make it like the book. And I thought that was a perfect example of why I was struggling with watching The Hobbit. Not that I've read the book, but I've seen the animated movie, and I enjoyed it with my cousins and watching this. So, again, from a kid's point of view, it was enjoyable. But watching the movie overly long, after a while, I really didn't care. I just want to get to the very end to see how this all plays out. And, of course, it plays out the way it did in my head. I don't know why I was thinking that I had to watch the last movie, but I had to watch the last movie. But having said that, there's no reason for me that I would want to go to the theaters to see the longer version or the R-rated version, because I guess they're going to include the more graphic scenes of violence. But honestly, I could not care at this point for the Hobbit movies. And then Mark, when he was talking in his interview, talked about how he found a library book as a kid on Godzilla memorabilia, and that got his interest to what he liked. Jeez Louise, really? Jeez. Okay, so he talked to Matthew about that, and again, that perked my ears up immediately because, being a librarian, I know that feeling as a kid and having a book that has that kind of an impact on you. I mean, for me, it was finding books on how to make movies because I was interested in doing a movie at that time with a great gal, which I miss her terribly, but we wanted to do a Wolfman type werewolf story, horror movie. So we were going to call it Lupin. Not Loopin apostrophe Lupin, but Lupin Lupian, right? I guess I can't spell right now. But basically, what I was doing, I wanted to understand camera movements and all this. So basically, it was just in my head how I'm going to film a movie. So the library was a perfect resource for that. So again, I immediately love these guys. So I encourage you to to listen to the Masterland Ohio podcast. I will have a link to their blog, and then you can go to their podcast from there. But again, it was enjoyable. And on top of that, I started to read the book. They were talking about Chimera, and I didn't realize how much... Oh, my God. Okay, so we begin sort of again. I do apologize. All right. So getting back to Chimera. Chimera is something that I'm starting to read on my Kindle. So I really encourage you, if you guys like kaiju, like I like kaiju, and who does not like kaiju? Like kaiju. What? I really encourage you to read this. I got it through Amazon because, of course, we didn't have it in our library, so I was able to get it through Amazon for my Kindle or the Kindle app. So on that note, speaking of kaijus, yesterday I was kind of bored last night trying to get myself to sleep, and I was looking through my phone and I came across the news that Godzilla versus King Kong, or King Kong versus Godzilla, depending on how you want to phrase it, is on its way to possibly becoming a real thing again, which is great because, again, being a kaiju fan, loving Godzilla, all of them, loving, pretty much almost all the King Kong movies, except for the crappy ones like King Kong, what was it? King Kong Lives, which was with Linda Hamilton. Terrible. But there are some great ones like King Kong Escapes, which I love. And of course, you had the remake from 1976, I believe, with Jeff Bridges. But still, King Kong was really fantastic when Peter Jackson did it, even though it was a bit of overkill with the monsters on Skull Island. But you know what? I really enjoyed it even more so than, of course, the remake. But not as far as being on par with the first one, but still is enjoyable. And then, of course, there is going to be a new movie called Skull Island. So I'm not sure in what context this is going to take place, if it's going to be prior to the King Kong movie back in, I think, was it the 30s or the 40s, in which this, actually maybe before then, that took place, in which, because the world wasn't all mapped out, it kind of made sense that you would have these creatures on an island that no one else knows about and cut off from the rest of the world. So now, having said that, my friend Edward, who's also a much bigger kaiju fan than I am, because I thought I was, but he's much more, his kaiju kung fu is superior. I just leave it to you at that. So I had asked him this earlier today about what his thoughts were. He says, well, by the end of the 2014 Godzilla movie, Godzilla is without any doubt the good guy. I feel like Pacific Rim and Godzilla would work easier, simply because Godzilla vs. Aliens is such a huge part of the series blood. Also, it would be the easiest way to introduce alien invaders such as Megalon, Gigan, and Orga. So we'll see what goes on from there. Then I had asked Mark his thoughts about this. So he says, I'm all for the big budget reboot. Nothing could give kaiju genre a higher profile. The biggest conundrum, of course, is the size variance between monsters. Andy and I have mulled this over. Something will need to happen to Kong to bring it up to Godzilla's size, because I don't think you would want to shrink the big G. True. I adore the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, both Japanese and Americanized versions, which was intentionally comedic and amusing, as opposed to the dark flavor of the original. Adjusted for the inflation, it made more money than the original Godzilla film, so it'll be interesting to see if the lighter tone, or if they will have a lighter tone, or if they will go to a more perilous feel. Either way, history suggests that it could be a major success, especially with the right marketing push and the attendant merchandise. I'm sure some G fans who have hated this film, but not him, meaning Mark, very excited. At the very least, it means more Godzilla and King Kong books, Blu-rays, and collectibles. So yeah, I'm really all for a new Godzilla versus King Kong or vice versa film, simply because I don't mind if it's going to be played that way. But honestly, with the last Godzilla movie, I would like this to be kind of more like a serious tone for me. Just because, you already kind of established this world. Pacific Rim kind of established that world, that this is not something that you're going to have kind of the fun and campiness about the stuff that we saw back in the 60s. So, this is not to be said that you can't have fun with it. I'm just saying that you want to kind of treat them with a little bit more respect. Think of it like the Adam West version of Batman versus, the Michael Keaton or the Christopher Nolan Batman, in which it's a different tone, but it's more set to the appropriate styling for that character. So with Godzilla, I was fine with it. The biggest complaint that I kept hearing from people is like, not enough Godzilla in the movie. You're not a Godzilla fan, because if you've watched any of those movies, for the most part, you're not going to get those Godzilla moments until the very end of the movie. If you see him throughout the whole movie, it loses the importance and the significance of seeing that creature. And I think Gareth Edwards did a fantastic job in having those kind of delayed reactions to get those monster moments. And when they did come on, they were fantastic. I was just more pleased that here, finally, we had like an American version, unlike the Roland Emmerich version that was with Matthew Broderick. And yeah, I have it for $5 because, it's all a disaster to watch, but I still want to see Godzilla despite this dreary remake. So, whatever the case is, I just think this is what I want to see. Now, on that same token, I think I mentioned this before, is that Pacific Rim 3 was going to have Godzilla into the mix. My only question is more about how this is going to play out, since it might mesh together with those monsters, as Edward talked about earlier. But the question is, are we putting Godzilla from the last movie with Peter Jackson and talk about that earlier, back in the early days? Which could be a possibility, because if you start off with the Gareth Edwards version, this is dating back since World War II, in which they were trying to kill off Godzilla and they couldn't, but he was there. So it could, in theory, if you want to do this, have the two fight back in the days of where Skull Island took place. That would make sense. It would have to be a draw. Not that I'm going to make any spoilers, but it would have to be a draw, because you don't want to kill off the franchise for either one. I know in the original movie, the last image is King Kong swimming away, no sign of Godzilla after the fight, and I, for the longest time, believed that the Japanese version had the reverse winner, where you had Godzilla swimming away and no sign of King Kong, but I was told there is no such version of that. So unless you guys hear something differently, please let me know, because I would like to update my information and make those changes accordingly. So I really do apologize for all the noise that's been going on, because, again, this is the library. You would think it would be quiet. It's not. At least not for this past week. And what's happening is that there's a museum across the way from us that is closing down and for about a year with renovations. Office staff have moved into the library and they're using our facilities. And it's been like nonstop building stuff, taking down stuff, moving stuff around. It's been driving me nuts. But, you know, we're neighbors and we have to do this. So I can't complain. I just have to wait it out like I did and then move on. So, with that said, please let me know what you think about the podcast, because, of course, I'm coming to the end of the podcast. You can email me at monstersci-fi-show@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter with the Monster Sci-Fi Show handle, but remember, it's the SYFY handle. And, of course, find us on the Facebook page. And again, I have lots of content that I post up there, and a lot of the times that's how I come up with those sci-fi, the big three that I want to talk about. So check my Facebook page and comment on that, and yours could be on the show, just like with Edward and Mark. So again, thank you to them for doing that for me on this podcast, because again, I want to include you guys, not just me talking to you, although it's fun, but honestly, you know, I want this to be a little bit more interactive. So on that note, I'm hoping to expand the podcast in the coming weeks to do like a commentary on watching one of the movies. There's a couple of options that I've been thinking about. I was thinking about doing Avengers Age of Ultron with my co-host Mr. Gene, in which we'll talk about and why we hated this movie. That's one. The other one is me watching The Amazing Spider-Man 2 while eating Taco Bell Ghost Chili Pepper Burritos, and to see which one is better as far as dealing with the pain, both physically and emotionally, of those movies. Or watching an episode of Star Trek Next Generation and commenting about that episode. But again, I'm looking at different ideas to do that. Come October is going to be my third annual horror month. So I'm looking to do Wes Craven, because he did pass away, in which I'm going to be focusing on his directing movies. Starting us with the Last House on the Left, which I already found and downloaded. I'm going to start watching, and I'll be ready to do podcasting on that. So it's going to be all October on Wes Craven. I will try my best to still keep on top of the sci-fi news, but it's going to be a challenge, but I'm up for a challenge because that's what I want to do. I want to keep on building my audience. And really, I appreciate you guys listening recently. It's really exploding my download counts, and the stats are really good. So I'm really happy about that. So check out the Monsterland Ohio podcast and their blog. Please give me some love. I will talk to you soon. So thank you very much for listening to the Monster Sci-Fi Show. Sci-fi from a certain point of view. Good night, folks.